I want to talk about communication because I think it'll help during this time when a lot of people are spending time with people, more time with people than they typically do. And it's just a disruption. It's very different for us to be, confined without the ability to leave and go out and explore and maybe get some of your own personal space or free time. Hey, Freeman. And I owe you a text back. Sorry. But I want to start with one of my favorite quotes by George Bernard Shaw, which is, the single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that has taken place. And I think there are so many people who, and we all do this, right? We have this thought in our head of, oh, this is what I want to do, or this is what I expect of someone. But how often are we sharing with them what our expectation is of them? And I think this was where it gets us into trouble sometimes. It can be small things, it can be big things. I want to talk through a couple of different scenarios, both parents and kids, parents being on the same team. I want to talk about communication with roommates, if that's your situation, or communication in a relationship. But again, I think so often it just comes down to, do you have the awareness of, have you shared what your expectations are, what your thoughts are with the other person? And if you guys have questions or additional thoughts, I'd love to hear them. Mike, totally. I think it's just huge. And communicating what you want or what your needs are isn't a bad thing. It only helps to open the dialogue so that you can be happier and the other people in your life will be happier. And then when everyone's in agreement, right, there's no surprises. And there's another quote that I love, that expectations are resentments waiting to happen, because that's what happens when we hold on to these beliefs and we don't communicate, and then all of a sudden you're mad at the person. Like, I love one of my favorite ones. I might use my parents as an example. I'm sure they won't care. Hey, Jess. So they'll, my mom will like come home and she'll be like, oh, John, why didn't you do this already? And he's like, like what? Like, you didn't ask me. I don't know what's going on here. And she's, but in her mind, she's like, well, I expected this to be done. And he's like, I don't know what you're thinking. Like, how would I know you wanted me to do this random task, or like, like shovel the snow or whatever it is. And that's just a funny example, but there's so many examples like this. It could be like, oh, why, with your, if you have roommates, it's like, why didn't you unload the dishwasher? It's like, well, did we talk about the schedule? Do we have a schedule? Who's responsible for these things? So I think when we communicate, we're setting ourselves up for success. We're removing this potential, resentment that we're going to build up for someone. And I think then we can get along better too. I mean, when you start to hold resentments, or you get mad at someone for something they didn't do, it just creates this tension in the relationship that's not necessary. So I think a lot of it is setting expectations, talking about what your wants and needs and desires are. I've heard a really great podcast recently with Brene Brown and Tim Ferriss, and they talk about how they sit down with their significant other every quarter or so. I think Brene Brown does it almost like every week. And they say, hey, what did I do good this week? What did I do bad this week? What do I need more of? And so they're reflecting on themselves and on the other person. And then that helps them come to a better understanding of how can they show up better in that relationship. I love that. I've done that in relationships before. And it's so powerful because you also know, like, okay, on, Sundays at 1 p.m., we're going to sit down and have this talk. So if there's something you feel like, oh, we need to talk about, you have the space to do it. So setting aside some specific time can be also really, really beneficial. And I have curious as best practices with your boss during work from home time. So that's a big one. Really depends on what kind of worker you are and what kind of manager your manager is. So maybe if you need more check-ins, saying to them, hey, I'd love to check in with you, just quick, 15-minute huddle at the beginning of the day or at the end of the day. If you want less, it's really all up to you. If you want less of that, it's just stating your needs, and then the other person can state their needs, and if they can meet your needs, or what is an agreeable kind of midway ground. So maybe your boss is like, hey, just give me a midweek check-in. Like every Wednesday, we're going to have our one-on-one. Again, it really depends on your scenario, what you need, what they need, what type of industry you're in, of course. But I love things like, I don't know if you guys use Slack or Microsoft Teams. I think they're amazing for staying connected with people and seeing what's going on. And of course, there's like different projects, but if you do a lot of work on your own, and you're typically in an office. I've worked remote for like 7 years, so I'm like, I don't know these challenges. I mean, I do, but like they're so ingrained in me. So if you're typically in an office and used to seeing your boss or communicating on in person and on a normal basis a couple times a day, then having that check-in once a day, I think is a great idea. Just again, depending, do you feel like it's more helpful in the morning or at night? Like, hey, what did we do today? What challenges did we run into? And then making sure you're celebrating wins too. I think that's really important. Kelly, I hope that helps. Shoot me just another comment or message if you need more on that one. But that's really what it is, you guys, is talking about your wants, needs, desires, and then also setting boundaries. Setting boundaries is huge. So if you need maybe some space, like if you're in a confined environment and you live with a couple other people, your family, your kids, it's making sure like, hey, this is my time. I need 1 hour to myself, and having that agreement, even if you have kids and some people, and I don't have kids in transparency, and some people with kids might say, that's ridiculous. Like there's no way. Have you tried to actually go to your kid though and say, hey, I really need this 1 hour so that when I'm going to play with you and in the hour that we're playing together, I'm going to be fully there and I'm not going to have interruptions. So can you let me have this hour and then we can have our time? It's honestly just communicating with kids. It helps more than you think it does. I've seen this in so many of my clients in the past. They're not that different than us. If you explain to them, everyone just wants to understand, right? So if someone's like, I just need to be alone, you're like, what? Like, what did I do? Like, did I do something? Did I offend you? And it's like, no, they have something else going on that's completely unrelated to you. So again, just communication, setting boundaries when you need them. Another topic I want to just touch really quickly is with parents and kids. Parents, you've got to be on the same team. I think one of the things that frustrates me most when I hear is when a kid's like, hey, can I do this? And the mom's like, go ask your dad. And the dad's like, go ask your mom. And that's not a healthy response. It should be, I'm going to talk to your mom or I'm going to talk to your dad and we'll let you know. You're then on the same team. Yay, Freeman, I'm glad to get your endorsement on that one. You're on the same team and you're not, pitting one another against each other, because at the end of the day, that relationship has to be stronger than the parent-kid relationship in order to be the best parent for your kid. With roommates, I think setting expectations, and these are just examples, and they might not exactly apply to you, but they could apply to you in some other way. I live alone right now. I have for a while, but when I've had roommates in the past, we said, okay, who's responsible for the trash on what weeks? Who's responsible for the dishwasher what weeks? Just like actually talking and communicating, like, okay, is everyone cool wearing the shoes in the apartment? Cool, awesome. Like literally just talking about some of these basic things can save you so much stress and heartache and conflict, where it's like, what if we just have a basic conversation about like, this is how I like to live. I like to leave the toilet seat down. Other people don't care. They like it up. But if we just talk about it, then I'm not going to be pissed every time I walk in the bathroom and the toilet seat is up. Again, it's a stupid example, but that stuff builds up can eat away at a relationship because you're building that resentment. The other person has no idea. They have no idea that bothers you, or they have if you don't like shoes in the house and someone's walking around with shoes and you don't say anything to them, how are they going to know that needs to be altered? So those are just a couple of examples. And in relationship, of course, like, what are your needs? Like, do you need more quality time? Do you need more physical touch? If you haven't done the 5 love languages, highly recommend that. And also making sure that you're setting boundaries. If you're spending 24/7 with a person, if you're spending so much time with them, it's going to be really difficult to have boundaries. And then that becomes a codependent relationship, which isn't healthy in the long run. So it's just setting ourselves up for success. Again, communicate more than you think. And always, if you communicate from a place of love and respect, you'll build trust. I think that's the biggest thing at the end of the day to remember. And if you have specific questions of like, hey, I don't know how to approach this person on this issue, just message me and we can talk about it. But I think it's just so crucial. If you start with love and you're like, hey, I'm coming with a place of love. And if you come from a place of curiosity too, like if you have an issue or with someone and you want to talk about it with them, say, hey, I've been noticing this. It's making me feel this way. Or, hey, when you do this, I feel like this, or the story I'm telling myself is. I love that. I use that all the time because so often we have these stories in our head and they could not be further from the truth. Like, hey, you didn't answer me for 5 hours. What the heck were you doing? Maybe they're like, oh, I had my phone off. I was just had on Do Not Disturb and I was doing some work, whatever. At the same time, I would say, and it depends who this person is. If it's a work or a relationship, that person who's like shutting their phone down, if there are crucial people, if you need to shut your phone down for like 4 or 5 hours and there are crucial people who you typically communicate with or hear from on a regular basis, that's on you to say, hey, I'm going into deep work mode or airplane mode or whatever for 4 to 5 hours. I'll be off the, what's the word? There's a phrase. Someone help me with the phrase. Off the grid for, this time period. So it goes both ways. But if you are coming to someone, you're like, hey, like, I'm just feeling this way about a scenario that's going on. I'm just curious what your perspective, because this is the story I'm making up and I'm pretty sure that's not accurate, but I want to check in with you. If you start that way, you cannot go wrong. I promise you guys. That's all I have. If you guys have questions or comments, please feel free to ask them. Thank you for that awesome question, Kelly. And of course, we can follow up with another one of these afterwards. But I appreciate you all. And I hope you guys are having a great weekend. Just make the most of this time. We can't control it. So whatever you can control, stick with that, focus on that, and make the best of the situation. Thanks guys so much. I'll see you later.